Before Nepal had a name, before the first temples were built, before any king had sat on a throne in the Kathmandu Valley, there was silence. Only mountains, forests, rivers, and the wind. The land was alive. It breathed through the trees. It whispered in the streams. It waited. And in that silence, something began. A story. One that's older than written words. Older than the legends we hear today. A story passed through voices, memories, and whispers. It begins with a man named Yalambar. You might not hear his name in everyday history books, but to those who still remember the old ways, to the Kurat people, Yalambar was more than just a king. He was the first to unite the tribes, the first to wear the crown of the high hills, the first warrior to walk as both protector and ruler of this sacred land. But who was he really? Was he just a man? Or was he something more? Some say he was chosen by the gods. Others believe he carried the spirit of the mountains within him, a voice of the earth born to lead. He came from the eastern hills, at a time when people lived in scattered groups, close to nature but far from each other. No kingdoms, no kings, only tribes, clans, families, surviving in the shadows of the Himalayas. Then came Yalambar, strong, fearless, wise beyond his years, but not just a warrior. He listened. He understood the pain of his people, the need for unity, the dream of peace. And with that dream, he began his journey. He didn't rise to power through greed or bloodshed alone. He earned the trust of those around him. He brought tribes together not just with force, but with vision. He spoke of one land, one people, one future, and they followed. That was the beginning, not of a kingdom, but of a legacy. The story of Nepal, the story of Kurat rule. It all begins with Yalambar. So today we go back to the beginning, back to the mystery, back to the man whose footsteps echo beneath the soil of this land. Step by step, we will uncover the journey of Yalambar, the king who rose from the mist, the first ruler of a people whose spirit still lives on in the hills and forests of Nepal. This is not just history. This is a legend. Every legend has a beginning, and Yalambar's began far from the center of any kingdom. He was born in the eastern highlands, in a time when maps didn't exist, when the mountains and rivers were the only boundaries anyone knew. The people of that land lived simple lives. They hunted, gathered, and grew food from the earth. They followed the stars, the rains, and the seasons. They honored nature, not out of fear but out of deep respect. And among these mountain tribes, one child was born under a sky thick with clouds and silence. They say the night of his birth, the wind was unusually still. No animals made a sound. Even the fire in the village center burned low, as if nature itself paused to watch what had come into the world. His name was Yalambar. From a young age, he was different. He didn't just listen to the stories, he remembered them. He asked questions that startled the elders. He would sit for hours, watching the forests, the rivers, the stars, as if they were trying to tell him something. He was strong too, not just in his arms, but in his spirit. While other children fought over small things, Yalambar was calm. When people argued, he listened. When elders spoke, he remembered every word. By the time he was a young man, he had already gained a kind of quiet respect, not just because of his strength in the hunt or his skill with a blade, but because of something else. People began to follow him, not because they were ordered to, but because they trusted him. They felt safer when he was around. more hopeful. At that time, the Kurit people were not united. They were scattered across the hills and forests, living in separate clans. Sometimes they traded, sometimes they fought, but there was no single leader, no shared identity. Yalambar saw something others didn't. He saw the danger of staying divided. Stronger enemies could come. Resources could run low. The peace they knew could vanish overnight. So he began traveling, from one village to the next, listening, learning, earning trust. He didn't demand power. He didn't force people to follow him. Instead, he showed them a dream. A united Kurit people. One voice. One land. A future where no tribe had to live in fear of another. And slowly, one by one, they joined him. Warriors offered him their swords. Elders offered him their wisdom. The youth followed him on foot, across rivers and hills, spreading his message. It wasn't a single moment that made him a leader. It was many quiet choices, many earned loyalties, and a vision that never faded, even when others doubted. This was how Yalambar rose. Not with a crown, not with riches, but with heart strength. The land was ready. The people were watching. And Yalambar, he knew the time had come. He had earned the trust of the Kurit tribes. He had walked the hills, slept under trees, eaten with the poorest families, and spoken face to face with clan leaders. He hadn't promised them gold. He had promised them stability, protection, belonging. And so, from those scattered sparks, he lit a flame. The dream of a united land, a Kurit kingdom, was no longer just an idea. It was becoming real. But uniting a people is not just about words. It's about action. And leadership in those ancient times wasn't earned through titles or ceremonies. It was earned through presence. So Yalambar began. Step by step, village by village, he brought structure to what was once only custom. He created a council of elders, drawn from all the major clans. Not to control them, but to honor their wisdom and to bring their voices together. For the first time, decisions were not made in isolation. They were made with agreement, with representation, and with shared responsibility. He built gathering grounds, open, sacred spaces where festivals could be held, and matters of the people could be spoken in the open. There were no stone palaces yet, no golden thrones. Yalambar ruled close to the earth. His court was the open air. His crown was the trust of his people. And slowly, something powerful began to happen. The Kurit people, once many tribes, began to see themselves as one. They spoke different dialects, had different rituals, but now they had a shared symbol, a common leader, and most importantly, a feeling of unity. This was the birth of the Kurit kingdom. Not an empire built by conquest, but a kingdom grown from within like roots spreading beneath the soil, quietly, steadily, firmly. And at the center of it all was Yalambar. He didn't rule like a tyrant. He didn't build walls between him and the people. He listened. He walked. He led. And the people followed, not because they were afraid, but because they believed. This was not just a political shift. It was a spiritual one. The Kurit people believed their ancestors watched over them. They believed nature had a soul. And now they believed their new kingdom was blessed. It was said the spirits approved of Yalambar, that the rivers flowed easier during his rule, that the harvests were richer, that the wild beasts stayed away from the villages. Whether it was true or not, the people felt it. And in a land where feeling was everything, that belief was the strongest bond of all. This was the moment Nepal began to take shape. not yet in name but in spirit. And at its heart stood the first king. Before the world knew Yalambar as a warrior, before kingdoms trembled at his name, he was a king, a just king, a ruler of the mountains. But something was changing. The skies over the Himalayas were no longer calm. The winds had started to shift, colder, sharper, as if they carried whispers from distant lands. Even the animals moved differently. The birds flew lower. The wolves howled longer at the moon. Old shamans in the Kuret villages lit their fires earlier in the evening. And in the stillness of the night, they began to chant not for the gods, but for protection, because something was awakening. Yalambar felt it too. The weight in the air, the sense that something dark and ancient was stirring in the world. And he knew it was time to prepare. He did not raise an army. Not yet. First, he turned inward. He journeyed deeper into the Himalayas, beyond his kingdom, to a place few had ever seen. A place where the clouds touched the earth, where the sky turned silver, where the snow never melted. There in silence, Yalambar began a sacred ritual. For 7 days and 7 nights, he neither ate nor drank. He sat under the ancient Bodhivana tree, the tree of stone, and spoke to the spirits of the mountains. They say the earth cracked beneath him. That lightning struck not from the sky, but from beneath the soil. And when he rose, he was not the same. His eyes had changed. They no longer looked at the world. They saw through it. He returned to his people not as a king, but as something more. A protector, a judge, a living force of balance. He began to train not just in weapons, but in the old arts. The lost techniques of breath, of silence, of listening to the rhythm of the land. He learned to hear the heartbeat of trees. He could sense fear before it was spoken. He could smell lies on a warrior's breath. His sword, once a tool of defense, became a symbol, a line in the world that evil could not cross. Yalambar became the kind of leader no one challenged, not because they feared his strength, but because they feared his judgment. When he walked into a village, people stood straight. When he entered a hall, men lowered their eyes. When he sat before a council of elders, even the oldest among them listened. He began receiving visitors from far lands, messengers, spies, kings in disguise, all curious about this northern ruler who was said to have the strength of 10 men and the patience of a monk. And though he remained humble, his legend began to grow. Stories said he once stopped a landslide with a single roar, that he faced a charging wild elephant and brought it to its knees with a look, that the spirits of his ancestors marched behind him in silence when he went to battle. He never confirmed these stories. He never denied them either. He simply watched and waited, because Yalambar knew something was coming, something beyond borders, something bigger than kings. The world was shifting. A great storm was gathering in the south. And when the time was right, when the line between right and wrong blurred, when the cries of innocent blood reached the mountain winds, Yalambar would rise, not as a conqueror, not as a savior, but as a force that restores balance, a storm born not from anger, but from clarity. And when that day came, the world would remember who he truly was. Not just a king, not just a warrior, but the war king. Yalambar descended from the Himalayas like a storm too calm to be noticed at first. The forests of Nepal knew his footsteps, quiet, firm, deliberate. Trees shifted slightly in his path. Animals watched him without fear. He did not speak. He did not announce his arrival. Yet the land responded to him. Even the rivers, wild with summer rains, slowed where he crossed, as if nature itself understood that a presence greater than kings now walked upon it. He walked alone, no army at his side, no drums, no banners, only silence and purpose. Villagers along the way did not know his name, but they felt something in their bones, an ancient recognition, an instinct older than civilization. Children stopped crying when he passed. The elderly touched their foreheads to the ground. Some whispered, "He walks like Shiva," though they had never seen Shiva with their eyes. But something in Yalambar's face, still as stone, eyes deep as night, reminded them of stories they had forgotten. He moved steadily southward through valleys and forgotten kingdoms, across plains and through thick forests. His mind did not race. His heart did not fear. He had no questions. He simply knew he was being pulled by something beyond thought. One night under a blood-orange sky, he sat beneath a fig tree near the edge of what the southern kingdoms called Aryavarta, the land of kings, the land of epics. The wind changed, and in the smoke of his small fire, he saw the vision again. Fields burned. Warriors screamed. The balanced Dharma was tilting, and standing at the center of that storm was him. But not yet, for this was no ordinary war. The Kurukshetra that loomed ahead was not a conflict of men. It was a reckoning of fate, a reset. The South had grown bloated with pride. Dynasties sharpened their blades not for justice, but for power. The line between righteousness and revenge blurred until no one remembered who started the fire. And Yalambar was not coming to choose a side. He was coming to remember the silence they had all forgotten. As he passed into the south, something extraordinary happened. Weapons rusted in their sheaths. Horses reared without reason. Even the sacred fire altars began to burn too hot, as if the divine realms themselves sensed what approached. He reached the edges of Kurukshetra just before the war began. Thousands of soldiers stood in formation. Great chariots gleamed in the sun. The air crackled with tension. The world held its breath. But when Yalambar stepped onto the plain, something shifted. He didn't enter from a gate or a camp. He simply appeared. Tall, silent, composed. His presence didn't demand attention, it absorbed it. Bhishma, the Kuru patriarch, paused mid-prayer. Dronacharya, master of weapons, turned his head with unease. Even Karna, fearless, golden-armored chosen of Surya, narrowed his eyes. He did not know the man, but something about him made him grip his bow tighter. Krishna saw him too, and Krishna, who knew time itself, frowned. He approached Yalambar with a calm smile, but in his eyes there was respect. Not the kind shown to warriors, the kind shown to forces older than even gods. They stood face to face. Neither bowed, neither spoke immediately. The air between them trembled slightly, as if reality wasn't sure how to hold them both in the same frame. Finally, Krishna said softly, "You are far from your mountains, king of the north." And Yalambar, in a voice deep and slow, replied, "The earth does not end at your rivers. The balance belongs to all." Krishna's eyes narrowed. "If you fight, the balance will not tilt, it will break." Yalambar said nothing, for he did not come to threaten, he came to remind. And in that reminder was terror, because both Pandavas and Kauravas knew. This man was not to be fought. He was to be feared. His strength was not just of arms, but of spirit. He was not made by rituals. He was born from rhythm, the rhythm of earth, the pulse of silence. And behind him was the unseen blessing of Shiva himself. No mantra could bind him. No blade could pierce him. No deception could touch him. The gods watched nervously, because if Yalambar chose to strike, neither side would survive. He could break Bhishma's chariot with one hand, snap Drona's bow with a glance, crushed Duryodhana's pride in a single step. And if he met Arjuna, even fate would hesitate. Krishna knew this. So, with the gentlest trick only a god could pull, he whispered to the universe, and just before the conch shells of war were blown, Yalambar vanished. No body, no sound, no goodbye. Some say Krishna folded time around him, hiding him in a corner of the world that men could not reach. Others believe Shiva called him back, his task incomplete, but his presence no longer allowed in a world about to drown in its own karma. What is known is that after he disappeared, a strange stillness came over the field. For a brief moment, warriors forgot their anger. Swords felt heavy, and some wept not knowing why. In Nepal, the shamans say he never died. He waits, still listening to the silence of the earth, still watching from the hidden folds of the Himalayas. And if the south again forgets its rhythm, if balance dares tilt once more, he will return,